Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hi. We're a smaller group this morning, I see. Maybe they'll trickle in for us. How's everybody this morning? So I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm Rita Martino, and my specialty is couples and family and blended families, and that's what we're about today. What can I tell you about myself? I've been working at Cornerstone for 9 years. I have my master's in marriage and family therapy from Stout University in the States. And why did I decide I should be a family therapist? Because of the family I came from. And it was kind of messy. And we had love in there somewhere, but a lot of not loving ways of being with one another. I come from a family of 5 girls. I'm the littlest one. Mother had a drinking problem that kind of put things into a whole different stream. Father was ill, and yeah, and I had 4 older sisters, and we fought a lot. So that's the dysfunction I come from, and I must have decided to be a family counselor when I was really young because I've always had this urge to have people be kind to each other and find ways of respecting each other. So that's what I love about family therapy is people really want to get along. People really want to love. Really, it's in our nature to be that. But we go sideways and we've had no training and nobody has to get any degrees or take any tests. You just get thrown into it. You have kids and then you divorce and then you have more kids and more fighting. And there you go. That's a family room. So I'm gonna let Anne Renee introduce herself, and then we'll go on and talk about what's happening today.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Anne Renee, and I've been at Cornerstone for just about a year. I'm a recent registered therapeutic counselor graduate. I just finished my master's in counseling psychology just a little bit ago. My background is in child and youth development, um, and I spent about 20 years working at the Royal Alec Hospital in children's psychiatry. So a lot of acute mental health issues, a lot of family dynamic issues. I'm very passionate about working with kids and more recently working with parents. So that's kind of how I come to be here today. Yeah, I'm not sure quite what else to say. I think I got into the field that I got into because of a teacher that I had in elementary school who was not a good guy and shouldn't have been a teacher. And it kind of just developed in me a very strong sense of justice for kids that sort of maybe can't speak for themselves and can't, just kind of need someone to be in their corner. So that's kind of what I've spent my career sort of doing. So, yeah, we're really happy to be here with you today, and we hope that you are able to get some good information out of today's course. Thanks for having me, everyone.
And let me add too, we've both been married, and we both have raised children. Mine are in their late 40s and 50s, and
Mine are not.
so that's I think the two of us bring you a good a good mix here that we can bring you, and hopefully at the end of it, uh, we'll see what we need, where we need to go further, and any questions that you have. So one of the things I really like is interactive. I like that questions would come. I do much better when it's quite interactive and you have a lot of questions. I feel like I'm fairly seasoned in family therapy because that has been my passion and pretty much my mission. Though I'm not biased against divorce, I really would like to see couples. I think they get married to stay married, or they get together because they want to have fulfilling, satisfying marriages and family life, but that isn't always the case. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of marriage and family therapists. And I've kind of reflected on that. Why isn't there more family therapy?
Mhm.
And why aren't there more couple therapists? And maybe we can talk about that a little bit. And maybe if you have some input and you have anything to bring. So I would like it to be really open because I can learn. I always can learn. Like I'm I'm a senior citizen, but I'm always about learning and knowing that other people have input and experiences and education that I don't have. So really feel free to jump in anytime, offer whatever you want, and ask questions. To me, that's more important than giving a lot of information. So maybe I would want to start unless you have anything
No,
to say.
you go ahead. Yeah.
I just give a little blurb about what I feel about family therapy. I love it. I always feel when I was in my master's, the theme was as many as in the room, let them be there. The more you have in the room, the more you have interaction going on, the more you can read body language, the more you're hearing from each person and their perception of what it's like to be in the family system that they're in. I feel like they teach me all the time what a functioning family is and what a dysfunctioning family is like. Let's see what else I want to say about that. I like systems work because I always get this picture of a bicycle and there's spokes in the wheel. And when you have a family, each spoke represents a different perception of how they're experiencing the family that they're in. So there's the system, like I have a system, so I have all my inner systems to take care. I think there's 9 systems and or maybe it's 9 organs and 7 systems. Anyway, I'm a system. I'm operating in a lot of different areas. In a marriage, that's a system. Husband and wife become a system. Each individual is a system. Then you bring children into it. The children themselves are a system. And then they're working with their mother and father. So you have all these, the main system are the parents. Then you have the subsystems going on. So that's what I love because it gets so intriguing how they're interacting and how they're bouncing off one another. Mm. So we're going to have a role play here. We're going to have a couple role plays and right, yeah. But I'm just going to give them a little
Oh,
bit.
okay, yeah.
And then we're going to have breakouts. They'll be like 5 minutes long. And then I think both of us would hope that when you come back from your breakout, that you have questions to ask or that you can tell us what happened in your breakout. Um, Anything you want to know about families, if I can be of any help and give you any experiences that I've had. Usually it's mostly the same thing. They come in with communication. We don't communicate. Then out of that comes the other things of money issues, raising children issue, jealousy, competition, um, fear of rejection. And that's just in the first marriage. If you get to the blended marriage and the blended families, you can add quite a bit more. So I think that's good, huh?
Mhm.
Think we can start with that?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to do a role play.
Should we start with our questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we just wanted to start with a little bit of like an open discussion. So hopefully people kind of feel comfortable just to kind of share among the group. We're just kind of curious who's actually interested in working with families or who works with families. What do you kind of consider makes up a family? What do you think makes a successful family? So we just kind of wanted to start with sort of a larger group discussion, just kind of diving into some of those things. Who sort of currently is working with families right now? So a couple hands up.
I just want to go over the characteristics of a functioning family. So one is balance towards change. In a functioning family, you can adapt and even welcome change. Emotional problems are seen as existing in the unit. Everyone can allow, there's not one person that has the emotions and the others don't, so you allow for that. Connectedness is maintained across generations with all members. Minimum of fusion and distance is not used to solve problems. So either I need you really close to me or I'm going to push you away. Each twosome can deal with problems that occur between them. So whether it's 2 children or the parents, differences between people are tolerated and encouraged. Sometimes preservation of a positive emotional climate takes precedence over who is right and who is wrong. Or would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? So a lot of times when you're working with couples and families, it's a lot of back and forth blame. And you have to see that I'm right and you're wrong. And obviously that's not going to get you anywhere. One of the main things I tell couples is once you're separated, why do you keep fighting? Because it's going to go south really bad and really fast. So the more that you can handle reactions, and maybe we can talk about that because that's probably the key thing in families is about everyone's reacting to each other rather than learning how to respond. And if you can help someone know the difference when they're responding and when they're reacting, to me, I've got an inroad right away. Then we don't have to carry on this fighting. We can just take what they bring us, because they usually bring us in an argument about something, which is good, right? We want the fights in our therapy room, because then we have a chance to take the fight apart and put it back together in a way that is meaningful, which brings people more in flow with each other. So whenever you catch this strong right and wrong, the sooner you can do a little bit of psychoeducation and say, help them know the difference between what it is to react and what it is to respond. To me, it puts me ahead quite a bit. So that's the right and wrong, which goes on all the time, right, with us. If one or more members say there's a problem, then there is a problem. And we know that there is no problem. I don't have a problem. You have the problem. No, we're having a problem. Family members can be used as a source of feedback and learning, but not as an enemy. Each person can operate selectively using both thinking and emotional systems with each other. A keen awareness of each person gets functionally from himself and what he gets from others, and awareness of emptiness in each member of the family. So we inclusive. In a functioning family, we're always including emotions, feelings, viewpoints, perceptions, beliefs. And with adult parents, you always have history, you have genetic history going on, you have what they bring into the marriage to begin with. So you'll have that handout, and that's probably going to help you along.
I just was going to add one thing to that I think often, in terms of, that if one or more people think there's a problem, often the dynamic that we run into, I think sometimes with families, is the kids are the problem, right? And so parents will come in and, my parenting is not the problem, or our family dynamic is not the problem, or collectively as a family, we are not the problem. My kid is the problem, fix the problem. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time today, hopefully sort of trying to unpack that a little bit. And, I think that probably any one of us who have met with families before have come across that notion that, I am not the problem. My kid is the problem, fix that. And so we're going to try to unpack that a little bit as we go, to sort of say, okay, how do we kind of bring it back to sort of the whole family unit and the family as a whole, to sort of take a look at, there is a problem, but it's not, one particular person. Let's, kind of take a look at that. So hopefully as we go, we'll sort of take a little look at that as well.
Okay. We're ready?
Ready? We're going to do a role play. And so the idea behind the role play is that you all are the counselors, and this very dysfunctional family has arrived in your office, and this is sort of the presentation that you receive. Following the role play, we're going to put you guys into some breakout rooms, and we just want you to spend some time kind of thinking through, what are you going to do with this family? How are you going to manage them? What are some strategies that you're going to try to come up with? What direction maybe will you go next? And so spend some time with your groups after the role play, just kind of thinking about, where you would go from here, with this family. So, I mean, basically we've come today because I'm trying to manage this family all by myself. Look at this. They're on their phones all the time. I can't get them to get off their phones.
Well, listen to yourself.
He sits here and does nothing.
Mom,
This
listen
is
to
my
yourself.
life.
Yeah, you're so annoying, Mom. Like, stop.
I mean, really?
You're always talking.
This is how they speak to
You're always
me.
talking.
This is what goes on. This
Oh.
is what goes on all the time. Can you help?
Now
Can you
you're gonna
help us?
jump in. You sit there and do nothing, and now you're gonna jump in. This is what I deal with. Oh my! Look
Just
at
hold.
this.
Kids, get off your phones. Put
Oh
your
my
phones down.
gosh.
We're in a session. We're paying for it.
Well,
Dad's paying for
Ask
it.
nicely.
Ask nicely.
Yes.
It doesn't do any
Who
good.
pays for that phone? Who pays for that phone?
Well, none of our friends pay for their phones. Their
Yeah,
parents
that's
do.
normal for parents to pay
Yeah.
for phones.
Oh my goodness!
I pay for the phone.
Thank
You
you.
pay for the
She's
phone?
supposed to manage you two,
You
and you
pay
have
for the
no
phone?
respect for her whatsoever. None. And then I understand that it's hard to be with Mom because we know. We know, Mom. We know what goes on.
Exactly,
I
that's the
never-
I know,
problem.
I know, I
We
know.
know, Mom,
I know.
What is that?
right?
I
We've
am,
been
I
talking
am
about
the
this all
only
the
one
time.
trying to keep this family together. I'm the only one doing anything around here.
Mom, you're always playing the victim, like, woe me, woe
Oh.
me.
Well, I don't see
I
you.
don't hear
I
Dad doing
I
that.
don't see you stepping up.
Well,
We're not supposed to do that.
I'm a
We're your
child.
kids. Exactly.
we're very
Like,
mature children looking at you
Yes,
two.
you're very mature children.
Thank you,
You
Dad.
don't do the chores. You're on your phone
Right?
constantly.
Right?
This is not
Video-
about us.
Video
you.
games go on
Yeah.
forever. No homework
Don't turn
done.
this on us.
Disrespect for us.
Mhm.
You think that you're 18 and you should leave. You're not 18.
Mm.
You're 14 and 16. You don't know what you're talking about. You have no clue.
I feel like we have a bigger clue than you
Oh.
do.
Yeah, we're not bickering.
I
Well,
mean,
really, I
we're
love
not
that you're
bickering.
stepping up. You just sit at home, you do nothing, you say nothing, but now you're gonna step up in front of the counselor. You're gonna make a big impression. You're gonna step up. Come on.
Oh, well, then go at it.
Well,
Have at
really, I am the
Do you
only
ever-
one. I'm the only one keeping this family, trying to
How
keep
much-
this family together.
And how many times are you gonna say, I'm the only one?
Well, it's
Like-
true. It's true.
Poor you,
Oh my
poor
goodness.
you. You don't have to work.
It's so tight. It's so exhausting.
It is
All
so
of it.
exhausting. I'm just, why did we even come to therapy?
You know what's exhausting? Listening to you two. We're constantly having to hear this.
Because you're the expert now.
That's why we
You're
go
the
to our phones, because our
oh
phones
my-
don't yell at each
yeah,
other.
the phones,
and
we're
talk.
all-
That's blame it on us. Just
Well,
blame it on us.
You're the parents.
Why don't you do what your
You're the
parents
leaders
ask
of the
you?
family.
We don't ask that much of you.
We're just children.
No, you're
No,
not children. You're old enough.
that's right. You're not 3 and 4
old
years
You
old.
said we're 14 and 16, not 18, and we can't leave. So
Oh.
you are, what are you guys trying to say to us?
Exactly. You're not clear. Nothing you say is clear.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna cut through all this. Your phones are gonna be given to me if something doesn't change.
Now he's gonna step up. After all this time, now
Okay.
he's
All
gonna
right,
step
can you-
up. Do you
can
see?
you-
Do you
I'm
see?
here, I'm here. I'm missing an
You know
important
what I'm
meeting.
hearing?
I'm
I'm
here.
hearing a double standard. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know
No,
about
the
you,
phones are gonna go. The phones are gonna go.
until we
Okay.
behave.
We're gonna
No,
just
he
cut through all
always
this.
does this. He always says that kind
This
of thing
time I
and
mean
then doesn't
it.
actually
We
do
mean
This
it.
time I
Dad
mean it.
means it.
Yeah.
Okay,
This time it's
sure.
going.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
want
I'm
your
with
phones
Mom.
gone?
This
Like,
is this is
no.
what happens. He says things, he doesn't follow through, and then we're
You know
back
what?
in
I'm
square
done with
one,
this.
and I'm taking it all
Just-
on
Yeah,
again.
you're the perfect mother. I've just done. I've gotta go to my meeting. I've had it.
That's right, Dad,
Well,
leave.
three.
You
Yeah,
always leave.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
get
yes,
out.
go.
That's
I
what
am.
you
I'm
do, Dad.
leaving. I'm leaving. I'm gone.
That's what
I'm
you always
gone.
do.
I'm gone.
Show of hands, who has seen that family arrive at their office or had some kind of interactions with a family like that? Who has seen that before? Yeah, a few of you. So Amanda's gonna put everybody into some breakout rooms. And again, we just sort of want you to take a couple minutes it's just a lot there to unpack. And so we just want you to, in your smaller groups, have a little bit of a discussion about where do you go from here? How do you manage this family short term, but also long term? How do you manage this family dynamic that's obviously very dysfunctional, very tense? And where do you go from here? So in terms of, some goal planning or treatment options, where would you go from here? What would you kind of focus on? So we'll get Amanda to put you in those breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and kind of talk through what people kind of came up with. Welcome back, everybody. I'm curious to know what some of you guys talked about in your breakouts in terms of where you would go with this family. That could be like immediately in that moment, but also kind of longer term. So what are some thoughts that people generated in their groups?
I can share a little bit about what our group was coming up with in terms of goals. We had mentioned exploring some family roles, each person, how they feel like, what they feel like their roles are. Also looking at setting goals with them. What does each person want? We were talking about, intakes, having kind of what each person wants from therapy and different things that might help in that process. And we know what's kind of going on from each person's perspective as well. We talked about communication skill building, both on being able to communicate, but also being able to listen. We also talked about relationship skill building too, just kind of maybe some psychoeducation in terms of that. And then we also talked about how potentially Rita, you mentioned systems. We talked about potentially that piece about having that system within the parents doing some couples counseling because of how it would trickle down to the children, and some of that work that it might need to be done without actually having the children involved there, because they're 14 and 16 and super impressionable at that stage, and how much of that partnership needs to be. I mean, yes, it's a whole system as a family, but there's also that system that might need to be worked with outside of that room. So that's kind of the different pieces that we came out with.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Melanie. Thanks for being brave.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else? I think we had three breakout rooms. So anyone maybe from a different room that feels comfortable to share?
And even if it's not real comfortable for you to share, this is all about getting past our edges. Thank
I
you.
can speak for our group, I guess. We talked about a few of the same things, like setting up some ground rules and finding some common, like maybe a common goal for them all to work on based on each of their own personal goals. We also talked about kind of finding a way to externalize the family conflict as the common enemy for them to all work towards kind of diffusing, so that because we talked about that blame cycle and getting stuck in that argument and circling around, and how do we get out of that and refocus the session. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add, but those are kind of some of the things we talked about.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good.
Thanks, Shelley. Anyone from the third breakout room?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. I was in that third breakout room. So we did also talk very similarly about a lot of those themes. We discussed maybe a little bit more of that immediate, what would you do when dad stood up to kind of leave? And Corey was saying, hey, like, hold on, kind of just saying, like, to kind of cue dad that he could stay in the session. And then if he did, leave, maybe we would want to give him a minute and then go have a look, see if he's in the waiting room or if he really left. So talked a bit about that, and then really kind of focusing on glimmers of hope, or looking for a little bit of hope within the what people are saying, and an agreement on goals. So maybe if we are able to externalize the family system, or like the dysfunction in the system as the common enemy. And Corey, do you want to add to what I was saying too?
I think the thing that I was just going to add, I like to do a positive frame. So it's just kind of like, now that I got a good experience of seeing what that's like, now we can get down to work. Because now they just gave me a little snippet of this was a typical pattern. So I like to always have that positive frame of that's actually a good experience, even though they're stressed about it.
Right.
I'm actually excited about it, because to me, it's like, this isn't that bad. For me, at least, from what I'm used to. So then you can go into it with a level of confidence that clients appreciate, because they think they're in a crap hole right now. But it's like, well, no, you should see some of the other stuff that we have to deal with. But this is actually nice and straightforward for me. So, and as you kind of get experience, I assume you'll start to see more of that, and then that positive frame, and it becomes easier to navigate and manage. I think another point, we were talking about, one of the people brought in a question of what happens if you don't get the whole system and one of those components. And I think I just mentioned is, it's nice to have that whole system. It's more fast, but you don't need the whole system to be able to influence the whole system.
Right.
It's the thing that I was kind of commenting on. So.
Right. And I do think that I also don't mind splitting up the system and giving each one their chance to give their perception of what it's like to live in that system. Because no one's heard when there's all the arguing and the blame. It's kind of shut down at that moment. No one can listen to each other because you're all in high survival mode. So you're in fight, flight, freeze, or like mom was in crisis mode. She was just going to do her thing and stop the crisis and take care of it all. So I do believe that if it's very activated, the nervous systems are very activated, then a way that you could do is spend time with each one. Even if I've done it many times, just split the session into 15 minutes or a half hour, and maybe see the parents and get are really feeling for what they're dealing with, and then get the children and what they're dealing with. And in this case, you have a son and a daughter, 14 and 16, and then you got a mother at home and a father that's trying to put all the bread on the table and take care of their phone bills. And so they're definitely all activated. And so they're just living out of their own survival mode, each one. So calming it down, seeing if you can get that healthy bit of separation so that each one feels someone outside the system is listening to them is a good way to begin the work of bringing more harmony and interaction in a kind way in the family.
Well, and you had even suggested about the stick. You wanna?
Yes, because of that, because if they're all activated in the room, they're all caught in their own survival mode. And sometimes you just might want to slow it down enough where I'll say, would you please be willing that one person could speak at a time, just to get out what it's like for them to live in the system. And sometimes that can help when they're all in a room together, that each one learns how to listen and not jump in while the other one speaks. I mean, it feels sad that a family can get that activated and get into all that victim and perpetrator mode within the family system, but that's what happens. Yeah. And then Sheila Stauffer had a good strategy, and we just liked it a lot. All of us in this room liked it a lot. So Sheila, if you'd be willing to share that tidbit.
Okay, so I'll introduce myself. I'm the executive director of Cornerstone. I have not done frontline work for probably 12 years, maybe a little bit longer, but I am a registered social worker. And one of my very first jobs was family preservation work. So I'd go into families that had child welfare involvement. And I was working with one family once, and I remember them quite a bit because they were a high functioning family, but they had a mom and a 16-year-old daughter that just were at each other all the time. And dad was about ready to walk out. He couldn't deal with these two. And so we were talking, and I was looking for a way to kind of help them get some insight, hear about their insight. So I said, if you were going to personify this disagreement, this thing between you, what would it be like? And the daughter said, oh, it's like a tornado that just pushes its way through and destroys everything. And the mother said, it's like a tsunami. You don't know when it's coming, but it just comes and ruins everything. And dad said, no, it's not. It's like a child's merry-go-round. You push it, and then you push it. And then you push it, and then you push it. And they both looked at him absolutely stunned because they had not seen, I don't think they saw their mutual participation. They thought it was out of their control. So that was just kind of cool.
So cool. Thanks, Sheila. Yeah. So it's interesting, and so many great sort of suggestions. And Sheila had actually come into our room just to kind of check on us and said, okay, well, I'm curious what you guys would do. And I said, well, I think, the first thing that I would do is tell this family to leave all their phones at home and go out and do something fun. And I think that part of that comes from a couple of the strategies that I sort of want to talk just really briefly about, which is sort of at the foundation of every family needs to be a connection and a positive relationship and a positive connection. And oftentimes, as we kind of mentioned earlier, you have these families that come in and say, my kid is the problem, fix the problem. When really, as a family, we need to sort of take a look at how we look at all of our roles and all of our parts. And so there's actually quite a lot of, kind of information out there and studies out there that actually say that really at the heart and at sort of the foundation of kind of a good, working family is the sense of connection and being able to have that connection. And if we don't have that connection as parents, if we don't have the connection with our kids, and if our kids don't feel that connection with us, trying to correct some of the behaviors that we might be seeing, or trying to ask them to put their phones down or help out with some of the chores, for example, is almost futile if we don't first have that connection. And so for some of our younger kids, there's actually this really great program, and I think Amanda has sent, there was just so much information, I wasn't sure what to send. So I just actually sent the link, and it's a program out of the US called The Incredible Years, and it focuses on very, very young kids up to about 10 or 12. And the basic sort of foundational philosophy is that we first need to have connection. So in a time where everybody's going everywhere, everybody is busy, they've done some studies that show that even spending 10 minutes of uninterrupted time with our kids every day. Now, this is a little bit younger kids, but spending even 10 minutes a day where we all put our phones away, we're not making supper at the same time, we're not, answering work phone calls at the same time. We just have these 10 minutes of uninterrupted time to allow our kids to guide us and sort of lead us in kind of some play or some activities that they are interested in, that even having those 10 minutes creates incredible connection. And having sort of that foundational relationship then gives us as parents sort of that opportunity to now put some correction in place where, we might want to put the phones away a little bit, or we want them to help out with some chores. But if we try to kind of talk to them about doing some of those things and kind of being part of that family system before we have that connection, or without having that connection, it sort of just a little bit gets wasted. And so I would totally encourage you, especially if you are working with families that have some younger kids, to kind of take a look at that piece first. And even with this family, although they were teenagers, I think I probably would totally say, you know what, everybody should commit to leaving their technology at home and go do something fun, whatever that might be for that family, and just get back to what does that look like to be a family and to spend time with each other and kind of get to know each other again, to have that connection. Because what we know is that if we have that connection, some of the other things kind of fall in place a little bit. So that was kind of one of the things. And again, so that's called the Incredible Years program, although there's lots of great programs out there. And you have kind of a link to that as well. And then for some of our older kids, there's a psychologist out of the States. His name is Ross Green. Probably many of you have heard of him. He's written a lot of literature, a lot of information about how sometimes we look at these challenging kids and think, they are the problem, when really we want to take a look at what is missing, what is the piece that's missing. And often what we kind of find is that some of the struggles that they might be having might be sort of a lack of being able to communicate how they're feeling and what's sort of going on. And so there's a system that he kind of developed called collaborative problem solving. And so again, there's a website that Amanda, I think, passed on to everyone. It's called Lives in the Balance. And again, it's just got tons of great information about working with families and a little bit more older kids in that sense. And so the basic kind of rundown of how collaborative problem solving works is that we take a look at a situation, for example. So let's say in the case of our family role play, it's maybe the technology. And so instead of kind of coming at the kids as Rita and I sort of were in that situation and, shouting and yelling, we might want to come up to them and, sort of say, look, I'm noticing that you're spending a lot of time on your technology. Why is that? Let's talk about that. And so getting that buy-in, especially from our teenagers, to be able to kind of sit with them and collaborate with them. And from there, we kind of talk about, what might the problem be? What might the problem look like? And let's brainstorm some solutions. But again, with our older kids, we can kind of take a look at brainstorming that with them so that we have that buy-in. So I think one of the main things in the family dynamic role play that we saw was that nobody had any kind of buy-in at all. Everybody's on separate pages. The brother and sister kind of maybe on the same page a little bit in that moment, but everybody else is sort of completely on their own page doing their own thing. So we want to make sure that we try to get some good buy-in from everybody involved. And in doing so, kind of including the kids in those discussions. So rather than having kind of a parents and, teen, we're all kind of separate and, you're going to do your own thing and we're going to do our own thing, trying to bring everybody kind of alongside by using this collaborative problem solving, by saying, here's kind of the situation that I'm noticing. Let's talk about it. I want you to feel heard. And that's kind of a big part of it too, right? Is that we want these kids and these teens to feel heard. And then from there, kind of trying to brainstorm some solutions so that they feel like they are part of the solution as opposed to just simply being the problem or being part of the problem. So again, there's tons of information to take a look at in terms, again, of collaborative problem solving. It's a great system. It's easy to understand. It's easy to kind of follow. And it's great for kind of helping family dynamics in terms of trying to get parents and kids kind of to the same end goal. And ultimately, we sort of all want to be on the same end goal, but we're just not quite sure how to get there. So kind of trying some of these practical strategies. And then again, along with sort of that connection piece that is, sort of at the foundation, hopefully kind of, might help some of these families along, and hopefully would help this family along a little bit. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to share that. But again, there's tons of information on those websites. Does anybody have any sort of questions or comments about that? Or does anyone have any experience with some of those techniques at all? Everyone's very quiet.
You know what, though? I wanted to say that it reminded me of a weekend I took at the West Edmonton Mall.
Okay.
And it was and I will get her name for you because she was so amazing. She was from the US, PhD. The name of her book is The Self-Esteem Trap. And it opened my eyes quite a bit to what we're living in this generation of all the technology and brand name clothes and the helicopter moms and having to be on all the benches of hockey, football, basketball. And she had done a 20+ year study while putting together all her research on what happened to kids from the generation, say, of the 50s and the 60s, and even the early 70s. She said that children lost any sense of being in a system, belonging in a system, and being part of what runs a home and what it takes to be in a home as a family. So she, at the end of these 20-something years, had recommendations because she said, we were busy building self-esteem, but we gave them so much self-esteem in reaction to the earlier 40s and 50s that they have no sense of being participating in everyday life in the system called the family. So then she instituted family meetings where, whether it was the 3-year-old, the 3-year-old was accountable for a 3-year-old appropriate responsibility. A 10-year-old could start maybe learning how the grocery shopping went. The 14 or 15-year-old would be given the checking account, and this is the money that's in it, and here's the bills that have to be paid, with all guidance. But each one in the family had to become aware of what it takes to be in the system of running a family and participating in the family. That has helped me a lot. I'm working with this family of 4 now, mom, dad, 2 kids, really distanced from each other, mother and father very distanced from each other, mother codependent with the son, the father now is codependent with the daughter, the 2 kids are in university. And I started this family meeting with them some time ago. And it seems to be, actually, we're making inroads. It takes a little bit to get this to happen and have them be accountable to keep the meetings going. But I'm finding that it's giving the 4 of them a reason to be at a table together and say what's going good and say what's not going good. And even if it's just a half hour. So if you run into something like that with families, that might be something you might want to institute also, because we've lost that ability to all be participants in a common goal of, this is called the family. And it takes all this functioning to operate on all these different levels. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think because of the busyness of our world, I mean, case in point, that we have to sort of be a little more intentional about planning some of these things and putting some of these things in place. So planning, a family meeting, or planning to spend time intentionally with our kids to create that really, I mean, all of this, kind of creates that foundation of connection and having that good, solid relationship. And, the other things kind of fall into place a little more easily if we first have that relational connection. And so, it's hard these days because lives are busy and, I mean, things are a little different now, obviously, but, typically, you're running to this and running to that and doing this, and several days has gone by. And, one of the things that, I mean, studies show a family who eats together simply eats together
Mhm.
on a fairly regular basis, those kids have higher grades, less alcohol and drug use, get into less legal troubles, go on to do post-secondary more frequently. I mean, there's tons of research that shows something as simple as eating supper together. And yet these days, we're going to and we're going there and doing all these things. It makes it much more challenging. So being intentional about creating those relationships, creating those connections through eating together, through family meetings, through spending time together, really does create a much more positive sort of foundation as we kind of move forward in those family systems, for sure. Any other comments before we move on, or thoughts or questions?
So last time when we talked about couples, I believe that I gave you the 7 intimacies. And if I didn't, I'd like to go just say it again. How many of you need the 7 intimacies? Or do you have it down already? Okay. So it's spiritual, sexual, intellectual, recreational, financial, social, and emotional. And the reason I want to bring it in because it's to me, these are basic components of a family system and a couple system. And they get very much out of balance, which is fine if they get out of balance. It doesn't matter. What matters is if there's agreement that it's out of balance, because then if you have an awareness, you know what level you need to work on. And so when we look at those, whether it's in the marriage, in the family, or the coupling, it's going to show up. So I wanted to go into blended families, and you probably have the handouts, but we want to do a little role play on it. So I just want to give you a little general introduction. Questions to consider with a blended family is what you would want to find out. Do the children call the woman mommy and the man daddy? Does each parent need to support the other parent no matter what? Do you as a couple reach decisions together about thoughts and expectations regarding the children? Lots goes on in blended families. I'm just going to go through just a few myths and some terminology. The vitality of the marriage itself is the lifeblood of the remarried family, not just the source of stability. It's extremely difficult to create a successful remarriage and raise healthy children, especially from 2 prior intact families. Has everybody here worked with blended families in second marriages? The statistics a few years ago was 1/2 of all married couples get divorced and 1/3 of all second marriages end in divorce. So we know that there's not a lot of success we're dealing with, and a lot of pain in blended families when it's not working right. A lot of guilt, bitterness, sadness, regret, loss, hopelessness. These are the terms that come in many times into a blended family. You're already feeling like a failure, but you have a need to couple again. And so you do it, but you bring all the baggage that wasn't integrated, that wasn't worked out, that's all setting in the second marriage. A sense of failure being brought into the second marriage covers a lot, covers your parenting, your inadequacy, your financial, your spiritual. It's if we look at the 7 intimacies, I would say that a blended family and a remarriage is going to touch into all those areas, all 7 of them. A few myths that I just want to go through is myth number 1, remarriage provides you an opportunity to correct all that you missed in marriages before. That's a myth. I'm not going to read the paragraph because you'll have it. We're just going to go over the highlights. Myth number 2, any man or woman who loves me must also love my children. Myth number 3, because my children's other parent is so ineffective or irresponsible, my current partner must make up for that parent's shortcomings for my children's sake. Myth number 4. The important relationship in a remarried family is the parent relationship. The remarriage will take care of itself. Myth number 5. My family of origin relatives will shift their love from my former spouse to my new spouse automatically. My children will love and respect my new partner because they know I love him or her. So those are the 5 big myths, and I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous and yet it's so true that people come into the second marriage believing these things. Yeah, I think that's all I want to do about that. And should we go into the next one?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so we now are going to,
We're gonna put them into the
we're,
breakout room.
you're going to go back into the breakout rooms and you're going to role play a blended family. And I'm going to give you 5 areas that we see in blended families that are a cause for pain and separation. So you can, we're going to assign them? I can't
Yeah.
remember. We're going to assign you
How many
what.
rooms do we have? 3? 4.
4.
we'll
Okay,
just
so we
do
have 5.
4.
All
Yeah.
right.
We'll do 1.
All right, we'll do 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have these 5 areas and we'll do one of them. So it's the ex-partner, sibling rivalry between the step sisters, brothers, the new in-laws and how that fits into social gatherings, right? Christmas, New Year's, all that. Legal custody battles and jealousy and competition between the kids, the siblings, step siblings, and the exes, because sometimes you have exes that it was a friendly, kind of a friendly mediation, and then you remarry. And so then the wife or the husband kind of stays in good friendship or parenting, and then that other partner is jealous of that and competes with that. Or if it's the opposite extreme, there's just intense legal battles still going on, and one of the partners bitter and angry and calls up all the time about the kids, and so they bring that whole big, huge clunk into the new marriage. So Amanda, you're going to appoint them what they're going to do, or are they going to pick out? How are you going to do that?
They're split up into 4 groups
Okay.
already.
So why don't we do this way? If you end up in breakout room 1, we want you to create a role play involving an ex-partner. So that ex person and how that dynamic kind of fits in. So that'll be group 1. Group 2, we want you to create a role play that involves sibling rivalry between the step siblings. If you're in breakout room 3, we want you to create a role play that involves those new in-law dynamics and what that looks like in a blended family. And if you're in breakout room 4, we want you to create a role play that has something to do with some of the legal custody battles that might be going on among exes. So legal custody. So 1 is ex-partners, 2 is sibling rivalry, 3 is new in-laws, and 4 is legal custody. So as you go into your breakout rooms, we want you to try to create a role play that is something that you might see based around that subject matter to do with blended families.
And then bring that back to us so we can all learn and grapple with these issues. And then the 5th one we're going to do here is jealousy and competition with the kids, because we're good at that.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of head start. Bring the kids back in and carry on. So we can come back together and maybe help each other know what any tips that we can give each other.
What
That
that looks like.
that's our main reason. It's my main reason for
Mhm.
doing what I'm doing right now, or how I go in every room with a couple or a family. My main thing is how can I decrease the amount of conflict and tension and pain, and to bring them into some level of connection that can move them forward. So
Okay.
yeah.
Have
Have
fun.
fun.
Be bold. Be brave and be bold. Welcome back.
Hello, everyone.
So we're gonna give you our role play, and we'd like you to come up with some strategies for this blended family of what you would do, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about how things went in your breakout rooms and your scenarios and what that looked like. But we're gonna do our scenario, and we just want you to kind of generate some strategies or some solutions where you would go with this family. Okay, go ahead, Rita.
Well, we call this meeting because there's a problem going on here and we have to address it. And the problem is these two cannot get together and work out things, and we can't work it out with them either. And so there is division in this family.
I just want us to be connected. I want us to be a family. I want us to come together.
Well, Dad, we know Amanda is a bit of the problem, more than a bit of the problem.
Okay, but Andrew, I think that's a little bit unfair, okay? Amanda is very great at lots of things. You are great at lots of things. You're both really different.
Yeah, but you know what, let's be real here, because otherwise we're not gonna face this head on. The truth is, Amanda lives in her room. Something is going on. She has never liked that you and I married. She has never accepted Andrew.
I agree.
And I know there's a lot of jealousy because, I mean, look at the boy. Look at high grades.
Yep.
Loads the dishwasher,
Oh,
mows the lawn.
why would I come out of my room
In
if that's all I
hockey.
hear?
I
Ready for
I
us-
don't do drugs.
Ready for a
Oh,
Don't do
scholarship.
good
drugs.
for you.
You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
Amanda.
Yeah, you're a loser.
Well-
Don't do drugs.
well, so part of this whole reason that we got together is because Andrew and I feel like something needs to happen, that you're not willing to see that Amanda is depressed. She does nothing in the home. She is in her room with the door shut. If you even try to knock on the door and get something response from her, you don't get it. And frankly, we're both very concerned. But we didn't expect this to happen, but it happened. So we need you to come on board with this, that Amanda is depressed.
But now we're ganging up on her. That's not fair.
It's not
Exactly.
even a ganging up. It's like, what are we gonna do now? This is
Well,
going on a year
You're
and a
her
half.
mom, you should be concerned for her.
But Andrew, I don't
We're
know.
concerned.
I'm not sure if Andrew should be involved in this conversation.
And
It's
why
a
was
little
I invited?
unfair,
Why was I invited?
Well, he's part of the family. You
Well,
can't just.
but it's
do
a
that.
Well, he can't leave him alone, so that's why Andrew's here.
But it's a little unfair that Andrew's. Have you ever tried to just hang out maybe with her and just spend some time together? You're just
Yeah,
kind of
have you?
barking at her.
Yes, but again, she doesn't come out of her room. She's doing drugs. She doesn't.
Sorry, I don't want to play hockey.
Well,
The worst sport in the world.
I'm done trying.
Also, I'm over you two speaking up for me. Like, you don't know anything about me. You don't know me.
Yes, but that's why I wanted us to be together, because we want to include you and we want you, but you've been angry since the beginning. You have never come into the family since your mom and
So
I
everything's
married.
my fault.
Well. you-
Okay,
you-
pause. Let's pause there.
Okay,
What are some suggestions? What would you do with this family? Obviously, Dad thinks his son is pretty awesome. Mom thinks her daughter's great, maybe has some issues. Where do we go from here with this blended family?
So was it one thing I noticed about your guys' dynamic in your blended family is there is quite a difference between what everyone considers a problem. So Dad and the child seem to be on board of what they thought the problem was, but the daughter and the mom had different ideas about what they thought the problem was. So it'd be interesting to understand where they're coming from, their different perspectives, and what they perceive the problem to be. And then in our blended family, so I was part of group 4, so we were to role play a legal custody battle, which was a bit of a struggle because we have a few people in our group who are like, I just want to protect the child. And they're supposed to be the ex-husband, who is supposed to be a little more vocal, or perhaps we involve the partners as well, so the new partners into this relationship. So we had people role playing the ex-wife, the ex-husband, and as well as the new partner and the new partner on the other side, and then we had someone role play the child. And our child decided to temper tantrum and cry the whole time.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. But it was mostly Janet just saying, I'm just going to decide to cry right now. And so it was a bit difficult, I guess, to role play, especially with the different screens showing up using video conferencing. Whenever somebody talked, it cut out everybody else out of the audio. So we weren't exactly allowed to kind of get into that dysfunction where we're interrupting each other.
Good input.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that was interesting. So we decided to kind of break out into the different roles of each character in that dynamic and explain kind of the dysfunction with each person and their decisions or their behaviors and what they might be saying. And so what we did notice as we continued kind of acting out that dynamic is there were so many other things to consider than just the people in the room. So just the like the ex-husband, ex-wife, and the two new partners and the child, there were so many other things like
That's right.
the lawyer involvement, social worker involvement, like other people in that situation who may influencing or putting ideas into the people's head, and also setting boundaries with what is it that you want your partner to be involved with, what decisions are non-negotiable for your relationship, and what decisions do you not want them to have an opinion have on or not influence you on your decision and what you would like with your child.
Mhm.
So there was so many things that it was hard to really grasp a situation like this and then move forward from it because of all these additional external factors that would be considered in a situation like this.
Yes, and
That's-
it's so
yeah.
true because when you get a family that's involved in these legal battles and it's a blended family, that's exactly what they bring in the
Yeah.
room. It's so intense what they're living with because of all the parts, all the roles that all these people are playing in this legal battle.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So what did your group talk about, Chantel, in terms of how you would kind of try to manage or facilitate all of that?
So one thing we talked about was the communication was very important. Quoting Rebecca, she said, communication is key. And so she said, I believe that giving tools to people and teaching them the words to use. So you're not blaming others and you're not accusing of others. You're speaking from your own place and from your own needs of what you need from this relationship or what you need with your child. And so teaching these negotiation tools and how do we compromise and using the words in a situation like that. So it's healthy communication. So you don't have to like one another, but developing this healthy communication so that a decision can be made, a compromise can be made for the benefit of this system.
That's awesome. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chantal. That's great. Okay, one of the other groups.
We had the group where we had the in-laws, and at first we were really trying to navigate how we were going to do this. But essentially what it came down to was we had two in-laws who thought the new partner was just not supposed to be a part of this picture. He wasn't there originally. He wasn't being the parent that he should be to the two children that weren't in the picture at this time, like while we were talking. And so it was everyone getting really defensive. And so essentially what we decided to come up with that as a group is that there was boundaries would have been the number one thing that we really thought, would have to be put in place. And that would be able to teach that communication, and we would be able to balance defense mechanisms. We would be able to figure out each person's roles and not making anyone that outsider, whether it's the new husband's not a part of this or the in-laws aren't a part of this. How do we keep everyone connected and reduce like scapegoating and all of that kind of stuff? And then exploring like what the issues are and what's wrong, and then finding the solutions in what everybody was looking for. So that was kind of what we did in a quick snapshot.
Yeah, that's great.
I can just add to, like, I think as a group, we found it really challenging, the idea of even having this dynamic show up in the counseling room, because we were like, when do you have your in-laws come with you to counseling? But I think that's maybe coming from our perspectives, like that wouldn't be common for us to do. Doesn't mean it wouldn't be common for someone else to do, or might not be the choice they would do. And then we also reflected on how much this shows up in couples counseling, because the kind of defense for family of origin from each person in the couple does come up quite often. So just having that added reflection as well, that we maybe wouldn't experience as other people would.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a couple instances where I've had this in-law situation, and it just come up recently where the grandma, say it's the husband remarries again and has a child that comes every other weekend, and grandma only wants that child. So the couple wants to go out to dinner, but grandma only wants her grandson or her granddaughter to come, and is not really receiving the new woman, the new wife, or that new wife's children. So I have a couple that are dealing with that. The other thing that I have a couple dealing with where she doesn't like her mother. No, he doesn't like his mother. His mother is controlling. And so the new partner agrees with him about how bad the mother is. And so which then they're gaining up to diss the mother, and the mother also is a grandparent, right? So that's interesting to see how you can move them together, where she could support how he would keep relationship going with his mother, because his father died and that the mother raised him. So I'm sure there's a definite codependency and enmeshment going on there. But the wife is just kind of looking to seek for him to just diss his mother and stay away from her, rather than foster anything. So there's a triangulation going on there. So that's why I thought the in-laws, because I've seen it enough times where the in-laws, especially if they're grandparents and there's children involved, how sticky that can get. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks. Okay, ex-partner or sibling rivalry.
We did the ex-partner, and we also found like the technology difficult to do a role play.
Okay.
Kind of lots of feedback and stuff, but yeah, it was interesting to think about all the different ways that an ex-partner would come up as a problem, and we kind of explored the role of maybe one partner being jealous of the communication between the other partner and their ex. And then that kind of conflicted with another partner avoiding communication with their ex-partner, and that causing a strain on the relationship because it leaves the other partner responsible for all the care of the kids that should be maybe balanced between 4 parents, and now it's only balanced between 2 or 3. So those were kind of the things that came up for us. And Cam shared a great tool. Cam, if you want to share that, like how you might approach that was really helpful.
Yeah, I use a willing and able table, where it's a quadrant, and you look at what you're willing and not willing to do and what you're able and not able to do. And then so one quadrant is I'm unwilling but able, or I'm unwilling and not able, or willing and not able, or willing and able. And so you start filling stuff out into the different boxes so you can identify which parts of those you can do. And so you got something right on the get-go. But then the next side is you look at, well, what are you unwilling to do? And maybe that's something, there's movement there, or maybe there's a reason you're unwilling, and we can then affirm values within that and strengthen that part and validate there.
That's awesome. I love that.
Is that online, Cam?
You know, I can share a little thing I made. It basically, I picked it up at from another counselor, but it's just basically a square, right? It's like,
okay.
It's like
Yeah,
the
I'll
attachment
get it right
square,
now.
right? So
Very cool.
I'll find that document and I'll see if I can post
Thank
it
you,
here.
because I find a lot, I run into that people don't know how to ask for their need to be met and be willing to receive that it can't be completely met, but maybe partially met. So that comes up a lot, wants and needs. And how do you define those? And are you willing to meet, even again with the sexual menu? You know, we talked about that last time, like 2 menus. Someone may not want sushi, somebody wants, French fries. Like in every area, it's a viewpoint that you're coming with and a perception. So I might need something really intense from you, and you just say, I can't give that to you in any one of those 7 intimacies, I may not be able to give that, but here's what I could give. And I
Mhm.
think that's part of what you're saying about the willingness and the unwillingness. I really
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good compliment there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Thank
I'll
you.
see.
Yeah, how did it
It's
go?
okay, it's okay, keep going, I got
Okay.
it.
Okay, so what do we have, which one do we have to do? Did we do all of them? Did we
No,
do
there's,
sibling rivalry?
Sibling rivalry, yeah.
Okay. Who could speak on behalf of sibling rivalry?
Group 2, who is in group 2?
We're in group 2. Okay,
Hey,
I can
Jen.
start, but you guys can jump in.
Hey, Mom.
So we actually had a lot of fun with this. We spent more time trying to see how complicated could we make this.
Nice.
But really, so basically the dynamic was it was like obviously a new partnership, and it was with 2 women. So I was one mom and Janine was the other mom. And we had twins. So and Kaylee and Brandy were the twins, and that they were Janine's kids, and then Corey was my son. And so yeah, just try to set up the dynamics a little bit. Corey was an only child and kind of the golden boy, and basically it's a family that's just coming together and living under the same roof for the first time. And of course the kids, it was just a big rivalry around space, about like physical space. Corey kind of gets his way all the time. He's in the basement, the girls are upstairs. And so we started playing it out a bit, and it was just really it was just kind of interesting, because you just realized all the how complicated it was, and all the dynamics that came out of it. And so we were suggesting probably once we played it out a little bit, probably would be best to maybe separate the kids from the moms and have some time just with the moms, because it seemed that the moms just weren't even on the same page and weren't a strong front. And so the kids were kind of running the show, and nobody's needs were getting met. And it was just, yeah, so that was sort of our goal at the end, but everybody can jump in too if I'm missing something.
Yeah, realigning the parents, because one was a lot more quiet and, kind of disengaged to some degree, or more passive, where the other parent, and then the kids were kind of doing their own little thing and being sassy. And so it was just, we had more fun in just spinning it around in that process. So it's, but I think I agree, you'd need to realign the parents so that they're at least, first of all, from a structural system, and then kind of go from there, because it was
Great.
a fun free-for-all.
Well, it definitely sounds like you made it as complicated as you could have, because I had trouble following whose kids were whose. So good job, you guys. That's awesome.
I love that you brought in the 2 moments, and I love that you brought in the chaos that happens when there's not enough space and one has more space than the other, and what goes on in that, because that has a lot of, I call it Post-it notes stuck to it. Like there's a lot of stickies on those types of scenarios in a home. And I think that's why I wanted to spend a little time on the blended families, because it's just double trouble in one way, especially if you're bringing in your pain from the last relationship, and you add all the outside forces that come to bear on a second marriage and a step siblings. Like it's just so, it hurts my heart to see the pain that goes on in what you would hope in a second marriage. You pull yourself up by the bootstraps sometimes, and you say, okay, I'm going to be loved now. We're going to do it the right way. And in short notice, there you are back again, having the same kind of expectations not met, isolation, loneliness, and now you have double failure, and all that goes on there. Is it any wonder that therapists maybe don't want to take on families? It's more energy to deal with. Is it more money? Is it less money? Do you get more wore out working with families? And so is that a truth? Is that a truth why there's less maybe family therapists than there are individuals? I wouldn't mind having input or viewpoints about that.
I think I have a, like, what I find is there's a mindset from even couples and families versus the individual. For me, it's like running a couple and family is like running, you're the orchestrator. So you're navigating and helping facilitate a lot of the stuff that's going on and directing. And it can be less work, but it's a different type of work. Individual work is a lot more focused and so I find the couple where I like couple stuff because I can be a lot more playful. I can do volley back and forth. There's a lot of I'm playing with the engagement a lot more process, where in an individual you don't do that as much. But it takes a different mindset to be the orchestrator versus the one-to-one therapist.
I like that word, orchestrator. That's a good way to describe that.
The conductor. I'm the conductor that's leading what's happening and making sure it's going on and directing and maneuvering. And it's more process oriented in a lot of the ways than kind of product oriented sometimes. But you're working on the product in a different way because you're facilitating an interaction while you have it, is what I do, right? Rather than just teaching or kind of working on a particular issue and then just drilling down into it.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts or comments specific to blended families that anybody maybe wants to share? Was any kind of challenges that you came across that maybe you didn't realize you might come across?
I can share, but it's just in regards to what you were saying before about maybe why people would be hesitant to engage with couples and families. Is that okay? So I work at Counselling, so I'm the program manager there. So I often discuss with therapists their area of practice and what they want to work with. And what I hear most often when I bring up couples and families is, oh, that's too much pressure. And so I think it's this perception of like, it's going to be my fault if the relationship fails or something like that. I mean, I think that's maybe some of that bias or even expectation that comes along with when a couple joins the room versus an individual. So that's just what I've experienced from maybe newer therapists who are a little bit hesitant to engage with couples and families.
That's a good point.
Can I add something to that too? Because you're mentioning, I think the other thing is age. A lot of the new therapists are younger. And so when you have a couple, they're usually older. If they're a family, they're even older because if they have kids and they're in that system. So you could have a 24-year-old with, a 50-year-old couple. There's two 50-year-olds plus their kids, or even 40-year-olds. And you get that age dynamic requires a level of confidence. I would say is another component that I see.
Yeah, which brings me back also to academia and how, like I teach at City U, and I don't right now because I'm technically not savvy enough to do it, so I'm on a break. But I think that there's not a real good program that covers or takes the time or whatever to delve in deeper to couples and families. And that's what I see with practicum students coming out of universities, that you maybe get one little package of family therapy and then a little bit of couple.
Yeah.
And so who would come out with any sense of competency, even if you were older?
Because you're from Loma Linda, right? You were doing that program?
Which one?
Loma Linda? Which MFT program did you go
No, City University.
City? Yeah. Because I find that, like, when Loma Linda was around, we had a whole bunch of more people coming through marriage and family. And now even the people coming out, like, they may have a course in family therapy, but I find they don't, they don't get it. And so it's really,
right. And then practicum students, it's enough to start with individuals, so so I'm not ready for couple. I'm scared. I don't want to do it yet. Sorry.
Being a mature, sorry, I was just gonna second that. I was saying, being an older student who I went back to do my master's too, I would agree. I felt it's more just not having enough programming. Like I had a family systems class and that was about it. And then when I did do my practicum several years ago too, just not enough experience with couples and families, but also I think just from my particular experience, like not really strong supervision when it came to those dynamics. So I did feel like I shied away a little bit from it just
Yes,
because I didn't
exactly.
feel like I really had the skills to support couples and families.
But also as a new therapist, like as a new provisional, I think the important thing is to keep your own biases out, which sometimes I find difficult because you don't want that transference or countertransference. And I'm fully aware of my personal background. And, you know, you have someone come in and you're like, ooh, oh my God, this is so hard to, you know, keep my face straight and not give any indicators that what you just did was really horrible or whatever the case may be, but just keeping the balance of ensuring you're not transferring or counter transferring or what have you back and forth. Can be
That's good. That's
really
really good.
intimidating.
Hey, Rita,
Yes.
I have a question for you. So I did a lot of family studies early in my studies a long time ago, and then I took a break from it. I'm wondering how much things have changed, you noticed, in like family systems treatment since the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot out now. I mean, because there's Gottman, there's E.F. Sue Johnson. Well, I mean, David Burns has some stuff out. And then there's EMDR and somatic work that's built on early trauma. And so for me, since I've been out, but I think, you know, I went back late in life. So I was 58 when I came out of my master's and plunged into this world. I see more trendy things that come out about family systems and couples, but I still think it's the good old, you're working with a system, you're working with subsystems, you're working with human beings that have different cultural and different environmental factors going on, so they bring that in, but I think the basics are the same. I think how you work with this family is the same, other than these trends that we go through.
But what about like the different ideas, like the structural family therapy?
I think those are tried and true. I think narrative family, I think structure. For me, I use a lot of psychodynamic experiential work. I do a lot of inner childhood work because for me, if I do the fullest genograms I can do, I get go as far back as I can, because that's really going to tell me the narrative of that family and what they're facing. So that actually, if I get that right in the beginning, I feel like, oh, thank God I have some things to go on here, because I'm seeing what the little boy in there and what the little girl in there is bringing with them that isn't integrated. And, you know, 2 years into a marriage or a live-in partnership, you start pushing buttons and the triggers show. And that's the basics of how am I going to be with the triggers, and can I help them become aware of their triggers? Because if you can bring it down to pretty as simple as it can get, you have hurts. When you speak like that, she's triggered. She's going to come out and want to go into survival. And then you're going to get defensive and self-protective. So you're going to react to her being in survival. And so both of your nervous systems are going to spin out. And then you're going to have a fight in spin out. I think that stays the same over.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Good question, though. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
We kind of wanted to just allow people the opportunity to just really talk a little bit about what are some of your greatest fears and kind of apprehensions when you think about the notion of working with a family. And I know for myself, I know someone had mentioned this earlier about sort of younger counselors. And when I first started working with children and families, I was really young and I looked even younger than I really was at the time. I didn't have kids of my own. I wasn't married at the time. And so I would get that comment all the time. Like, do you even have kids of your own? Do you even get it? And I think, you know, a lot of times that is, you know, a fear that we might have. Like, if we're not part of that system, how can we kind of understand it? So for me, I know that that was a really, you know, big part of trying to get into, you know, that groove a little bit of how do I kind of overcome, you know, some of those challenges of maybe being young and looking young, maybe not being a mom myself at the time, and so not really understanding some of the dynamics of that. But what are some other thoughts from people? What are some things that you would say might steer you away from working with, you know, family systems, or some, you know, fears or apprehensions that you might have?
Well, I think you guys have been presenting it quite well. To me, it's the flooding that happens when the system's there. When you have an individual, then you can really zero in with their experience. But I find that when you incorporate more people within the system, the situation shows itself more. So I guess that's part of how it can be a lot more effective if you can get progress there, because it's working within their environment and not necessarily taking them completely out of the environment to do the work, but it also presents, I think, the challenge as well.
Yeah, I think the getting flooded is probably a good term to use. That Andrew and I were talking, and he was talking. I work with him in his practicum, and how he could get biased. He could find himself getting biased in a couple or a family situation, and so we were talking about neutrality and I said, when I find myself getting biased, either I'm for the kids against the parents, or I find myself wanting to align with one of the partners, I pull back when I can feel myself getting too attached to how I feel it should go. And I do a little psychoeducation, which helps pull me out of it and puts me in a more neutral position. So whenever my psychoeducation would be just bringing out a principle that I know can operate in it, right? Or this is something every family runs into, and then I'll speak on that. Or every parent has to face this in their family life. And then it pulls me out of it until that quiets down in me, and I can feel I'm fairly neutral again. How neutral we can get, I suppose that's on a continuum to being really triggered in the situation, and because I'm getting flooded now because all of you are getting flooded. Or how, I mean, it's actually a gift for me, I feel, to be confronted with intensity and to see how centered I can stay with and allow them to be in their intensity and in their, their sensory polyvagal nerve way up there, right? Spinning, because the fighting is the spinning. If it's that self-protective and defensive fighting, right? Not really good arguing. Yeah, so maybe that's one tip I could give. The other thing I want to say, I'm not marketing family life, family therapy, but I'm speaking about how juicy and wonderful I think family therapy is. I get this picture of a family living under this roof on a block in a neighborhood in a certain area, and no one knows pretty much what's going on in that family, barring the police come up with the flashing red lights and there's domestic violence. No one knows, but that family and their energy or their frequency is affecting all of us. Like garbage that's thrown in the ocean will ultimately affect all of us. It's the same kind of toxic waste that goes on under a roof. And I think about that, and I think, if anybody could make a difference, wouldn't we want to? If we're about climate change, if we're about reforestation, whatever, if we took that to a living human system living under a roof, what's going on in that family? How hurt are all these beings? And there is no help for them. Or these children every day living in something 24/7 who don't know another way because this is all that's being role modeled. If I could have a chance, no matter how weak I was in it, if my heart was there and said, could I make a bit of a difference in this family or this couple, that maybe they would get one or two tools that they could use to bring more peace into their home. So when I lose vision, that's what I pull up for myself. I go, well, if someone would have came into my family and would have said, oh, I need help, I would like to invite you, I know a good therapist, you don't have to have all this brokenness and pain here. Wow. That would have been something, because as one of 5 children, we were all experiencing survival, just trying to survive it. And in the days I was raised in the 50s, 60s, you didn't air anything out in public. Everything was kept in the closet. That was polite, that was proper. and so you didn't get any help. So that kind of keeps me in my forefront that I think we all have something to bring to a family, no matter how little it is. It's a meager offering. You're a therapist, bring it, it'll grow. You plant the seed, it'll grow. And so that's my little spiel about couple and family therapy.
Can I just ask Anne Renee a question? Anne Renee, you were talking about how you felt when you were a new counselor and when you were out there with families and you didn't have a family yet of your own. How did you deal with that for yourself? What tips or tricks can you give the group for how you dealt with that and with your own feelings of, yeah, you're right, I don't have a family?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so interestingly enough, one of the things that I did, which is, for better for worse, I guess, is I changed my appearance a fair bit, and so I dressed better than everybody else. I, had myself really well put together. And I felt like if I at least sort of looked the part a little bit more than, looking like I just graduated, so to speak, that might help. And oddly, I found like it did help that, just kind of in some ways looking the part, and maybe that helped me own the part a little more. I'm not sure. But, I think ultimately you have to remember that you got into the profession that you got into because you're passionate about doing this work. You're passionate about, the things that you do. And so for me, my background being in child and youth development, I was always really passionate about that. And so, I would be really honest with families and just say, you know what, no, I don't have kids of my own, but I do happen to have a lot of, tips and some tricks that would help for your family. And, I'm passionate about trying to help your family. And, I think just having that sense of honesty that, I mean, yeah, you know what, I don't have kids of my own yet, but I do, come with a certain knowledge base and um, try to come in sort of an unassuming way as opposed to, I am the expert and therefore you should listen to whatever I have to say. But, kind of taking that more client-centered approach, right? To say like, you're the expert and you're the expert of your kids because you know your kids and I'm just meeting them. And so let's, sort of try to work together on that rather than, kind of having this hierarchy. So I found that that was kind of what helped in working with family. For myself, I mean, I think you just have to remind yourself that, you do have the knowledge and you do have, again, kind of that passion. For me, it was sort of always about having the passion to sort of help some of these kids and to kind of remind myself that, their parents, it's not that their parents don't want to do a good job or don't want to do well, but they just, can't in this moment. They maybe don't have some of that knowledge base. And so, here I am to just kind of help them, with some of that knowledge base. So, yeah. Hopefully that's helpful.
If I can just speak to your initial question about why I think people shy away from it. I think Jen touched on that level of competency that programs don't cover a lot of family systems. And I know for my program specifically, they actually won't allow for a lot of family and couples hours in the hour collection. So it gets a little tricky there, even if you are interested or pulled toward it. So yeah, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, as Rita said, I mean, you come out of school and yeah, for most of us, I mean, when I first started looking into my master's, there was some great master's programs with like family systems and working with kids, all in the States, all 3 times the price, right? And so, I mean, you're kind of limited a little bit in terms of what's available, particularly here in Canada. And so, of course, you kind of come out the other end with, very little knowledge and therefore, very little comfort level as to, what, if a family like our little role play initially presents in your office, I mean, you're just going to feel really overwhelmed and really unsure, like, where do I sort of go from here? And if you haven't had some of that education base to kind of ground that a little bit, yeah, it can be really overwhelming for sure.
I want to add, just like it's overwhelming for me to take care of my bio, my social, my spiritual, my emotional, and my mental states. At times, sometimes I'm like, that's way too much to take care of and try to keep in balance. But as I stay aware of that, how do I keep myself in balance? Again, I bring back to I'm a system. So the principle would be you're working with a system that's out of balance, and you're trying to see if you can help it somehow find its way back into some level of balance. And that if you could keep it that simple, it's not so daunting as if you see 5 people in a room, or two fighting people who've been married for 60 years and have hated each other for 45 of them, right? It's not so daunting because you just know, okay, it's a system, it's way out of balance. Take the spokes out of the wheel. What is that spoke saying? What is one theme that's in there? And then can I help move that one and put the spoke back in, and then maybe take another spoke out. But I think that's where it gets kind of challenging. Like for me, I find being my age, it's challenging as this more senior woman to take care of parts of my body that I didn't have to take, say 20 or 25 years ago, because it's out of balance. Or it's rightfully out of balance for the age I'm at, but I have to bring more awareness. That's what I'm saying. It's about awareness. If I have awareness, I have choices. If I don't have awareness, I have no choices. So wherever you would give a couple or a family awareness, like you might want to look at this, or this might be happening, you may want to sit with that for a bit, offer that to them to see if there's a truth in that they could recognize and have awareness. Because then the next step is, well, now knowing that, do you have the willingness or the unwillingness, now that you see that, to make the decisions that are needed to bring it more into balance?
Hey, Rita, can I add to your metaphor?
You do it.
Because I like the spoking one, but instead of pulling them out, I like the idea of, because I tend to find it, I'm either tightening or loosening that spoke, because it's either too much pressure, there's too much energy, that we're loosening it so that they back off, so that we can create that rebalance on that system of that tire.
Great, that's a great
There's
way to look at it.
All the spokes would be all the different potential issues that could be in there, and some of them might be fine, but your job as a good family therapist is to be able to look through all those spokes and see which ones need to be loosened or tightened to get that balance again.
That's great. That's great. I like that. That's good. Thank you. That's good. Yes,
Well, one
so
of the-
this is what I would like to see. I would love to see more conversation around the 7 intimacies and how they move in us individually and how they can move in a couple or a family. That there could be more collaboration. Like, I'm thankful to Sheila that we put couples collaboration together, because I see how needful that is to hear other people bring couple client issues to the forefront, and then to have the different therapists give their viewpoints on, or the strategic ways they would do it. Like, that's all learning. That's how we learn.
For sure.
Sorry, I cut
think
someone off. Who is it?
Cam, I think. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, one of the questions I did have was just in terms of logistics with working with families, because you've got multiple people that you're trying to coordinate. And what is your experience with that? Is it do you have a minimal number of sessions you can expect, or do you anticipate like that each session you kind of set it up so that they're not deregulating and anticipating they may not be coming back together as a whole family? You may be working with parts. That part's a little intimidating to me, just not having experience with that.
Right. I can say if you can get a vision for the family, like the first couple sessions, and you're taking the genogram and you're getting a family history, you're kind of organically getting a vision of what you can see, it's showing itself, right? So then from there, you would get creative and resourceful. If you want to keep the family together, or do you need to see the kids for a while and let them get out what they need to get out, or do you take the couple separate and see where their marriage is at? So the freedom to kind of move about within the system by keeping the system, that's your client. The client is your system. And then you're going to move within the system and see what's needful. Yeah. And then that's how I move in it. I'm always moving in that way organically. What are they bringing in? What is the theme of how the system started getting a crack in its foundation? How deep is the crack? How wide is the crack? And that's how I know how to move in the maze of the system.
Does everybody kind of have a pretty good understanding of what a genogram is? Yeah, a lot of heads nodding, so that's good.
Because they usually they hit that in the family systems, right?
Yeah.
I think that you do
Mhm.
get what the genogram is.
Mhm.
But how many do that? How many, like I've taught myself a lot about a genogram,
Mhm.
um, just because of need, because I want to know what's genetically there in the DNA
Mhm.
that's keeps coming up in each generation.
Mhm.
And so one of my key invitations for participation is maybe you wouldn't want to hand that down to your children. So this is a good generation to see if we can stop that movement going, right? If again, awareness means choice. If I don't have awareness, how can I choose? Yeah. So yeah, I think it would be so good to delve in this more about families because each individual has come from some kind of a family situation
Mhm.
and has dealt with it growing up and is going to find it in their marriage and their the next generation.
Mhm.
So it does seem like it would be a good invitation for us to, even if we weren't going to specialize in it, to have some understanding of systems and how systems operate.
I think it's crucial because if every person you have that you're seeing individually is part of a system
Right.
and multiple systems. And if you don't understand systems theory and that concept, it's a really detriment. I think family, I was telling Emily, I think this, I hated family therapy when I was doing the course. And, you know, and I sucked at it the most, but you know, but ultimately in the end, I think that became probably the most important component that I had to struggle to learn because it is part of everything. And you have to, all the individuals you have to know is how they're running in a system, how to influence systems, because that's usually where the issues ultimately tend to be in the majority of the areas. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how you come into it, if you step in it little tiny, you know, you're just going to step in the water and take another little foot, a step, or you come into it full on like I did. I just immersed myself in it. If it's something that pulls you in your developing your career and evolving, then I would say go for it. And I don't know how else to do that, but just like any practicum, I had to get in the room with it.
Mhm. I think too, I would just add to that in terms of the system that I think part of sometimes what freaks people out, this has been my experience anyway, maybe, you know, you can agree or disagree. I think sometimes part of what intimidates people about a family system is actually the kids. And how do the kids factor in and how do you, you know, like I don't want to work with kids and I don't want to, you know, have some, you know, tantruming toddler in my, you know, office, for example. And so how do we, you know, kind of manage that? And I think, you know, if we think back to kind of what everybody wants out of life, and there's sort of this principle, it's, you know, just that sort of basic attention principle, that really what we all want is someone's attention, whether we're kids, whether we're adults, we all want that attention. And we're either going to go about getting that attention in positive ways or negative ways. So when a family system is sort of at odds with one another or they're, you know, in crisis, they're just lacking sort of that piece of attention that, you know, they've gotten into such a kind of rut, I guess, of all the attention that they're giving one another is negative. If you think back to the first role play that we all did, you know, it's just nothing but negative attention everywhere you look. And so trying to kind of take a look at that and say, well, you know, we all want attention, but we're giving it to each other in the wrong way. So let's kind of back up and take a look at how we can, you know, start fresh and start giving each other more positive attention and kind of start from there. So whether you're, you know, 3 years old or, you know, 30 years old, again, that kind of that same principle can kind of apply and we can use that kind of throughout that whole system, I think. Anyone else? Any thoughts about fears or apprehensions about working with families?
I had a quick question. It's a bit more practical though. I'm just wondering with families and you have that many dynamics in the room, are you doing a 50-minute session or are you encouraging them to come for longer sessions so you have more time to sort of work through all the different dynamics that could be happening?
Yeah, for me, it depends on the intensity
Mhm.
and how many are talkers. And and that helps guide me if I say, well, because a lot of couples, I will say, I need a 2-hour session. We can't move through all this. So because by the time it's heated up at 1 hour, you just know you're just beginning now. The ice is melting. We're getting somewhere and it's over. So with some couples, I'll say 2 hours, right? And so also the same thing with uh, with families when you have them all in a room and it's very heated up in the room. I will maybe take it apart or do breaks. If I think 2 hours we could really get somewhere, then I would take a couple breaks when it's needed. Or maybe again, I would ask a couple people, maybe go get a glass of water, and then I would see the other members that they feel need more quieter time. It kind of depends how intense it is.
I think in the size too. I've had families like that are 7 that the hour was actually quite fine. And that's, they filled in my whole office. Whereas, the small couple, depending on the person too. So you're looking at, size and that, how chatty they are. And you might not be able to get a good gauge of that until you've seen them that first
Exactly.
session. And they go, okay,
Yeah.
now I know where we're at.
Yeah.
I had a question as well, similarly practical, in regards to COVID and how we're practicing now with lots of online sessions. How would that work with a family? Do you guys do that?
Yeah, I'm always willing to do that. If they can find a place in their house and they can kind of fit in the screen. So I've had them stand behind or squash in or climb on a lap. Couples, I really like it. I mean, other people say they have a hard time with couples, but it's just, I don't know if I'm not, that's just not one of my challenges. Like, I like that they have to sit close together. And I like that they have to turn their face and look right in each other's eyes. They're that close because they're squashing into the screen. I think, oh, that's something I don't have to do. They just need to be that way. Yeah, and then of course there's dogs climbing up and out like this one. I love this one, climbing up on her lap. Yeah, I love it. So I just think that it just brings something into the session. Now, if I had 5, could I do it? No, I think that it's kind of a lot to try to get on a screen, but maybe they can do what they're doing here. I never thought about that if it gets too crowded, I would just have them do what we're doing.
With high conflict couples that I've had, like I've had couples hit each other in session. So it'd be allowing enough space that they're not within arm's reach. But I've also had couples who online, they could not sit into because it was just too heated. So they actually went to 2 separate rooms and they did online and they linked up. So it was 2 separate scenes and it was kind of a weird couple therapy, but it's just being able to process that. So
yeah, that's good.
I think too, when you consider like even just bringing the kids back into those sessions as well, I think that nowadays, particularly because of COVID, many of our kids have become, very tech savvy. And so I think that, even in being able to kind of incorporate the kids, I think that, more than ever before, probably in our society, in our world, kids are as comfortable doing, this type of thing as we all are, because they're learning that way, they're talking to their friends that way, their grandparents that way. And so again, yeah, I think that you can, kind of make that work for sure.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So Corey, so when you're in a situation where the couple gets physical like that, how do you navigate it?
I will stand up. I have an advantage of being 6'4", and so it's just partly being male and being tall, I guess. So in that case, like it just happened like probably a week ago. So this is like, seriously, I don't think I don't remember the last time I've actually had a couple hit each other, but it was the woman hit the guy. So she jumped up and she launched right into him full on. And so I had to get up and kind of like, no, we're not doing that here. And so it was just being able to get up and being assertive enough to be in charge in that system. and or you know, willing to take a risk. Like I don't have an issue with it, but I guess if you're depending on that risk, because she wasn't going to hurt me, but she definitely was going to hurt him.
I've had to do it. I work at Insight, and we're lucky we have emergency buttons just in case something goes completely sideways. And I had a gentleman, there was 4 of them in, and they started calling each other nasty names and dropping the F-bombs. So I had to use my teacher voice and say, absolutely not. This is not acceptable. I had to get the kids out because it got really nasty. And at one point he got up and he had his arm back like this. And all I thought was, oh shit, please don't make me press that button. But I had to stand up and say, this absolutely is not, no. And I walked him out. Uncomfortable for sure, but I needed to make sure that those kids were going to be safe and they were not going to be in the middle of this if it went completely sideways. And then I would have been, you know, screaming because Corey's office is like 3 feet away from mine, but it's a challenge and it makes me not want to work with couples sometimes.
Yeah, to echo what Brandy and Corey said, I find like standing up and then using the teacher voice or a really firm voice the best way, because you just have to like be assertive and take control in that moment.
I think too, it's kind of important to remember that when you get a family that's in crisis, nobody is really controlling that family anymore. They've just kind of gone off the rails. So there might be one person in the family that thinks they're controlling that family or thinks that they kind of have things under control. But ultimately, when they're in total chaos like that, everybody is kind of, you know, gotten lost in that shuffle. And so sometimes these families, I think, need us to kind of be that, you know, bigger presence in a way to kind of, you know, to stand up and to use that teacher voice and just to say, like, wait a minute, like, no way is this okay. And it almost kind of stops the situation to a point where it's like, oh, right, yeah, this is not okay. Like, how did we get to this point, you know? And so they kind of need us in some ways to maybe in that moment kind of take charge and just say, like, yeah, no, this is not okay. Like, we got to start over, you know? So I think those are good points for sure.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And when you said that, it makes me think of how important it is to do a bit of psychoeducation with a family. Maybe they're not going to remember it. Maybe they're not going to honor it, but at least you've put it out in the beginning. Here's how this may work. This is how I believe that if we bring these principles in, we can get somewhere with this. And then at least you can say, remember when I said at the beginning how we would define somehow how the therapy will go. We agree about it. And then we can reevaluate it in 2 months if we see that this isn't, or I'm not doing it in a way that it's acceptable to you. We can evaluate that also. But let's get a little bit of a definition to how we're going to be within this family. And
I also think I think it's important for the therapist to debrief that with their supervisor as well, because it can be intimidating. Like, I'm 5'6". I got nothing on this guy who's 6'2", right? So it's just to be able to break that down and go, well, that was insane and really, you know, a little bit overwhelming for me. And, you know, so it's important to debrief that with your supervisor.
I think another thing to add to that is partly is I think you underestimate the ability. Like when I'm looking at it, I've seen like 5 foot tall, 80-pound grandmas wield enough psychological power on 6'4" kids and adults, because it's that level of internal confidence and I'm in charge and you're going to smarten up and sit down and follow that. And when that presence is strong enough, people listen, even though yes, technically they could have thrown her around, but it's most people don't resolve to that physical stuff unless they have significant issues. When they have that stronger presence, they tend to defer if that's in a tier. So
yeah, I'm seeing right now this big guy in my room who stood up with his big heavy fist with his wife in there, and they were from another culture, and he just yelled as loud as he could, "You are my wife and you will submit and obey me." And he had been getting increasingly more abusive. And I did ask him to leave the room. And he said, okay, I will, but she's taking the bus home. So he left without her. So She came back a couple more times, but she was in a pinch. She was from another culture and she had to stay with him, and that's how it went. But he was intimidating. Yeah, he intimidated me. Big and burly and had a lot of force within him. But you just find, I think you call it up. You just call your authority up, because when you know it's inappropriate and it's not going to happen, I mean, it could get a little scary, but I believe that you can call that up to defend yourself in any kind of situation. If you were on a bus or, right, going into a 7-Eleven and somebody confronted you, you would have to pull something up, right? Fight, flight, or time to freeze.
Some might flight or freeze. So I encourage people to wield or try that. I call it the parent voice or the teacher voice, because if you've never actually done it, we did it like it was a men's group exercise to kind of really do that. And the first time I was doing it, I had a bunch of guys just look at me like, no, like, I was like, what do you mean? This is my best. And no, I had to get it up to a point where they knew I meant business, because I wasn't taking it seriously enough. And I thought I was, but they could read the subtleties, the nonverbals and stuff like that. And the only way I can really say you do that is you got to practice with someone else to turn that on and they'll know it, because you'll feel it. And if you haven't practiced it, it's a skill set. So practice it. It doesn't come naturally to lots of people.
Right, and I think that's why we would shy away from that, right? Shy away from more people in the room, because it's like, I don't know that I'm adequate to deal with that. You know, I used to think I can't even deal with one other person and get through it. How am I going to do this with a family? But I do think you find something in yourself that knows that I won't be able to help this family if I don't pull this up. If I don't find this directness and this clear, direct way of delivery, I won't be able to get them forward. Same thing with a couple. I think that's what we ask ourselves. How can I move this couple forward? How can I move this family forward? So in some ways, there's a little bit of direction that's needed working within the systems. A little bit more direction, I do think, and a little bit more, every once in a while, some psychoeducation. So as we begin to close this 3 hours, does anyone want to offer us anything else? What I appreciate is that you had technical difficulty trying to do breakouts and role plays. So as much as we both Anne Renee and I really like interactive in the role plays, maybe that isn't shouldn't be a high priority when doing this. What do you think? Any thoughts about that?
I would just say I really enjoyed watching yours. I think it set the tone very well, like for what it can look like. And it was also very realistic. So great job.
Thank you.
I do appreciate the breakouts for processing and to be and learning from each other as well. I think it's helpful, because it's different from learning from people in the process than always people who get it already. You know, let's say they don't get it, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Oh, it also gives us, I guess, opportunity to kind of spit it out, where we're like, I don't know, it's not as big of a group, and be like, okay, I don't know about this idea, but now there's nobody to lead it. So we're either going to stare at each other or just spit something out and try. And so hoping there's no judgment in the group, you're able to go, I don't know this. So it does allow for a different level of that processing, like Cam was saying.
It really shows us how human we are. You know, we may have letters behind our names, but we're really we're names, and we're human, and we feel inadequate. And, you know, it's not easy to talk publicly when you don't know anyone and you don't know how they're going to perceive you, or if you're going to be way off. Yeah, it's just vulnerability. It's just pure vulnerability. And that's what we're asking our clients, to be transparent and vulnerable and open. Then we get together and we go, oh, I don't think so.
I would also argue that, like, many of the best sort of family strategies and parenting systems came from, I don't know, let's try this. That's where we kind of, you know, do some of our best, you know, brainstorming, is we trial and error, and, you know, something works and that's amazing. And then something else doesn't, and we'll toss it out the wayside. So yeah, it's good to have that for sure.
Well, I've appreciated being in these two with you, and I think I've gained. I just always do. I just think we all put our vegetable in the pot of soup and come out with something good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. This was really great. Hopefully you
Thank
were able
you.
to get some help.
Have a good rest of the day and thank you.
Thanks, everyone.